Welcome back to the Painted Pages channel presenting Chapter 8 of Odyssey. Enjoy the creation of breathtaking acrylic paintings, bringing the pages of our story to life. Chapter 8. First Trip. Azur showed up in my apartment 15 minutes later. He'd hardly given me any time to jump into the shower and dress in an extreme rush.
Hi, gorgeous.
He was grinning at me when I opened the door with my damp hair, a towel still wrapped around my head. All the agitations disappeared as soon as I looked into his eyes, which glowed brightly against his all-black outfit. He looked striking. His black long-sleeve sweater was hardly showing the collar of a black shirt, black khaki pants, and black shoes. I was home again, and I sighed out of relief.
Nice t-shirt.
He commented. It was only then I realized I was wearing my t-shirt inside out.
Are you ready for the big day?
Obviously, I wasn't. I need to change first, I said, heading for the bedroom. I removed the towel from my head and changed my t-shirt to a long-sleeve light blue sweater. I checked the rest of my outfit to ensure I had it all on right. At least my jeans were zipped. I came back to the living room, and Azur was watching the news. A Vietnamese family had been arrested for breeding dogs in their basement, but the dogs were meant to be part of a family recipe rather than house pets. The reporter said it was a delicacy in Vietnam. At least 10 dogs wagged their tails excitedly at the news reporter. "I can't believe how cruel humans can be," I exclaimed. "How can they eat dog meat?" I was disgusted. Azur looked at me blankly. I couldn't read any emotion on his face.
We need to go,
he said. I wondered if I had said something I wasn't supposed to say. Maybe he also ate dog meat, otherwise he always had something to say about everything. I turned the TV off and followed him to the door. "Are you going to tell me where we're going? I should at least know if my outfit is okay for the trip. Do I need to change into something else?" I was concerned that I was underdressed for whatever we were going to do.
Your hair is wet.
He touched a strand of my hair. "It's warm outside, it'll dry."
Wear comfortable shoes and take a jacket.
He never asked me how things had turned out with Anne and Jack, but I felt the urge to talk to him about them. "It didn't go so well with Jack and Anne yesterday," I said while we were stepping out the door of my apartment. "Anne was upset. I don't know how to comfort her anymore."
Be there for her whenever she needs you, but the rest is up to her. It shouldn't concern you.
He stared at me and I nodded. I knew he didn't want me to attach to her troubles and make them my own. That wouldn't help her. On the contrary, it would increase her burden even more. If I wanted to help her, I had to send my good energy to her. That was yesterday's lesson. We walked around my apartment building and arrived by the lake. I could easily make out the borders of the ship that rested by the huge dogwood tree. My heart started racing. I came to a halt a few yards before the ship, unsure I wanted what I was about to do. A heavy sense of panic weighed on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I sat down, practically collapsing on the grass, and couldn't move any further. He sat by me and sighed loudly.
What am I going to do with you, huh?
He reached out and placed his long fingers on my face, turning me gently to look at him. I gazed directly into his eyes, and as mesmerizing as they were, they made me calmer again. The fear dissipated slightly.
Please trust me. You'll always be safe with me.
I nodded but still couldn't speak. He placed his hand on my shoulder.
We don't have to do this if you don't feel comfortable. I wouldn't be offended. Maybe it is not the right time,
he said, but I could sense the disappointment in his voice. "I want to do it," I said at last. "Today, I will do it. Just give me a second." I raised my hand to quiet him. I needed to steady my breathing and calm down. He inched closer to me and hugged me tightly. He stayed still and waited until I was breathing normally again.
What is it that you're so afraid of, Lara?
He asked gently when my breathing stabilized.
Is it death? You know you have a better chance of dying from a lightning strike right now than from riding her. And there isn't a single cloud in the sky.
He added sarcastically. I chuckled. "I'm not afraid of death, not sudden death at least. Well, maybe a little." I tried to explain myself. "I'm afraid of the dark space, not coming back to Earth ever again and getting lost in the darkness forever." I confessed the truth, looking at him apologetically, worried that what I had said probably didn't make any sense to him.
Oh,
His shoulders sagged.
I understand now. I should have been more specific with you.
He moved his hands off my shoulder.
We're not leaving Earth. I'm not taking you to space. I know you're not ready. Think of this as an airplane ride with style. We'll just go to another city.
He said, as he rose to his feet and brushed the dirt and grass off his pants.
Why don't you come inside and take a look at her? If you don't feel comfortable, we'll postpone the trip to another time. Or for good, if necessary.
He extended his hand to me. It was a relief that we were only going to another city, and it shouldn't have been a big deal. "Beam me up, Scotty," I told him the catchphrase from Star Trek, forcing myself to sound excited. I held his hand to rise to my feet. He chuckled.
Be careful what you wish for.
"You've got to be kidding me."
I'm not. She can beam me up if necessary, but it wouldn't work on you as well.
"Why not?" Not that I wanted to be beamed anywhere, but I was curious.
Your frequency is low in the third dimension, so your energy is very dense. You wouldn't be able to recover from the process for days, if not months. If you made it out in one piece at all.
He said with dry amusement in his voice. My stomach churned at the thought of it, but I dismissed it immediately as I was pretty sure he had no intention of beaming me anywhere. I surveyed my surroundings, finding no one near the lake. Then, I turned my attention to the side of my apartment building, wondering if someone might be watching us from a window. "What if somebody sees us boarding?" I said in concern, my mind refusing to grasp what was about to happen.
Don't worry. She can scan every single thought within a mile radius and make sure everybody is oblivious to this direction. When humans see something they can't comprehend, they automatically dismiss it anyway.
He said, unconcerned.
Do you see the extension coming down from the ship?
I focused carefully in the direction Azur was pointing, and an almost invisible tube came down from the bottom of the ship to the ground.
Once we enter that tube, we'll no longer be visible to anybody.
We walked around the tube, and a door slid open, revealing the pearl-white walls of the interior surface. Azur stepped in and extended his hand to me. My heartbeat raced again, but when I looked in his eyes, all I could see was safety and his passion for me. I accepted his hand and stepped into the elevator. It took less than a second, the blink of an eye, between the door closing shut and opening again. Inside, the ship was surprisingly bright and spacious. I wouldn't have guessed it from the faint look of the outside. It reminded me of the ideal fashion of contemporary houses in home magazines. Everything was shades of gray and cream. A flawless glass window, about 3 feet wide, circled the walls of the spaceship. I could see the park, the lake, and the apartment complex from every angle. There were 2 identical long cream-colored sofas, curved slightly to fit the walls of the oval-shaped room, on opposite sides of the ship by the window. The large dome-like hemispherical ceiling, also a shiny, creamy color, was made of overlapping triangular pieces. It looked ready to open toward the sky. At the far end, there were 2 big seats facing outside and a large, long panel of dark glass lying flat in front of the seats by the window. There weren't any computers, lighted buttons, or cabinets to hide things. Everything was in the right place and well organized. Azur's eyes were on me, measuring my every move.
How does it feel?
He asked finally. Feels comfortable, I said. Familiar, I added. A big grin appeared on his face.
I knew you would like it. You've been in similar ships before. That is why it feels familiar.
He pointed at the front seats.
After you.
I wasn't sure which one of the seats belonged to him, so I looked at him with questioning eyes.
Doesn't matter. Pick one.
You're right. This is traveling in style, I said, remembering his earlier comment. The glass window in front of me revealed a beautiful view of the park and the lake. I looked around to find the seatbelts but couldn't locate them. Azur, where are the seatbelts?
There aren't any. You won't need them.
He must have seen my concerned expression.
We can always do this another time, you know.
I'm fine, Azur. Do whatever you need to do. As long as we stay on Earth, I'll be fine. I need to go to work tomorrow. I chuckled at my own comment and awkwardly shifted in my seat. I felt a subtle movement under my feet. The ship was rising slowly, but I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been looking outside. I held onto my seat tightly, expecting a sudden shift, like on airplanes, but nothing happened. I could see from the view outside that we kept rising at an accelerated speed. The trees and buildings were becoming smaller, and eventually, they disappeared. I didn't experience any discomfort despite the high speed. I took a deep breath of relief. The hard part was over. Suddenly, the color of the window started to change. It was getting darker, impossible to see outside anymore. I looked at Azur in a panic.
The ship will reach a speed that will make it very uncomfortable for you to look outside, so I've asked her to block the view.
You did? I gave up trying to comprehend the relationship between him and his spaceship. Obviously, there were no buttons or steering wheels involved. It was too personal for me to understand. How fast are we traveling?
More than 70,000 miles per hour. We'll be at our destination within a few minutes.
How convenient, I murmured with unease. I was getting bored, I added sarcastically.
Please relax, Lara. I can hear your teeth clenching from here. Relax your jaw.
You know it would help a lot if I knew exactly where we're going, I snapped. Humans are much more comfortable when their destinations are clear.
This is exactly why I didn't want to say anything. I want you to get out of your comfort zone. This is your first step toward releasing some of your fears, to stop trying to be in control all the time.
He looked at me suggestively.
Plus, if I told you our destination, you would be even less willing to go.
His eyes were on me again, measuring my reaction. You're not helping. I was really agitated by his comment.
I promise you, you'll love our small adventure,
he said with confidence. Just then, the windows started to lighten up again. I was able to see the outside. There were a few clouds around us. The ship was descending slowly, and I could see the greenery and shorelines of a city. How come I don't feel the changes in speed? Everything is happening so subtly. I was impressed.
She shields the ship from the outside friction. Otherwise, it would be very uncomfortable for us to travel, especially for you.
I bet it's my frequencies again. I was getting irritated by his comments about how my body frequency was so low and dense. It made me feel uncomfortable with my physical appearance. He nodded. Of course. I sighed.
Well, you would have been okay during this trip. We didn't travel that fast, but if we had to exceed the speed of light, we'd all dissolve, including the ship. The shield acts as a capsule, eliminating the mass of the ship and anything else inside.
I thought it wasn't possible to reach the speed of light, much less exceed it, I murmured. It was never in my interest to question the speed of light or its possibilities until I was at a party a few months back. One of the guests claimed to be a theoretical physicist, and thanks to the TV series Big Bang Theory, he received a lot of attention from the other guests. Alan, the host, who was my longtime friend from college, got into a heated discussion with the physicist. Alan asked him whether he believed in life on other planets or if extraterrestrials ever visited us. It is possible. There may be lives on other planets, but I don't think they can ever visit us here, the physicist said. The closest planet that has a possibility of life is 500 light-years away from the Earth, and it's assumed that it can support only primitive life forms. There are also other planets that may have more intelligent life forms, but they're thousands of light-years away from the Earth, not to mention that it's not possible to reach the speed of light unless you can discard your mass, which is your physical body, completely. He crushed Alan's spirit. What about wormholes? And what if there are more intelligent beings in the universe than we are? They may have already figured out how to reach the speed of light, Alan suggested. There are only theories. The wormholes are not proven, and there is only a possibility. If they exist, these portals may provide easy access from one part of space to another. But again, these are only theoretical. Regarding more intelligent beings, I have a hard time believing in them. We've been advancing at a pretty fast pace, and I don't think there are any other civilizations more advanced than we are, he claimed. It's only Hollywood movie nonsense. I can assure you we're the most advanced creatures in the universe, he added, sure of himself. I was annoyed by his response, though I didn't care if ETs existed, but as a scientist, he was pretty closed-minded. You know, you remind me of that dude who said, "Everything that can be invented has been invented," I blurted. He was Charles Dewell, the U.S. Patent Office Commissioner, back in 1899. I wanted to back up Alan. Thanks to my Facebook page, I had read the quotation the day before, and it stuck in my mind since I found it funny and sarcastic. You should know that quotation is not really the words of Charles Dewell. There's no evidence that anyone in the patent office really said anything of the sort, he snapped, annoyed. I was very much disturbed by his arrogance, and the fact that he might be right made me anxious. No sense of God or its miracles was a part of his life. That was true for me also, but the thought that we were the only ones who had ever evolved in this vast universe made me feel lonely for some inexplicable reason. I stopped paying attention to his conversation. "I wish you could meet my friend Aylin," I muttered, more to myself than Azur. Azur already knew who I was talking about.
Maybe someday.
We landed on a deserted area between two high-rise apartment buildings in a neighborhood that seemed old and not very well maintained. There were plastic bags and piles of trash everywhere, but there wasn't anybody to be seen.
Excuse the mess, but this is pretty safe for the ship.
I didn't question him or ask where we were. We walked among the tall apartment buildings, at least 5 to 6 stories, and each had different shapes and different colors. They didn't represent any architectural beauty or significance, but rather disorder and chaos. We were approaching a busy street, as I could see the dense traffic from where we were. The loud sound of the cars was already filling the neighborhood. It was hard to guess where we were by watching the people on the street. They didn't show strong characteristics of any particular race. We could be in Italy, Spain, Brazil, or even somewhere in the Middle East. I had no clue. Azur raised his hand to stop a taxi when we reached the street. The driver had dark brown hair, which desperately needed a haircut, and a thick mustache. He looked as if he hadn't shaved for a few days. He said something in a foreign language. I couldn't recognize it at first, but when Azur replied, speaking the same language, I knew what it was. My eyes were wide open. I wanted to slap Azur in the face. "You've brought me to Istanbul," I snarled at him in disbelief. Being here brought back so many painful memories. My mom's struggles during and after our visit to Turkey and the rejection we faced from my father's family. The city and everything in it had denied us the most essential thing in life: happiness. I hated it. We met my father's parents, for the first time, at the international airport in Istanbul. It wasn't a warm and welcoming reunion, but a clash of two different cultures. My father looked tense, and so did my mom. My grandma was wearing a scarf covering her hair and a long jacket, which made me wonder if it was wintertime in Turkey in the middle of June. But both my uncle and my grandpa wore short-sleeve shirts, so I concluded my grandma must have been sick or very cold all the time. My father greeted his mom first. He leaned down, kissed her hand, and brought it to his forehead. It was such a strange gesture for me to witness from my father. His mother gave him a hug eventually. I later discovered that hand-kissing was an important traditional gesture in Turkish culture. It was a way of greeting a person significantly older. I repeated the gesture while I was there visiting other relatives. But when my grandmother approached me and stretched her hand out, palm down, toward my nose for the first time, I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. I didn't know anything about the Turkish culture or the significance of hand-kissing among the elders. I had just witnessed my father's action, but as an 8-year-old, it took me a while to register the fact that I was expected to do the same. As the hand stuck to my nose, I looked to my mom for help. She whispered in my ear, "Do as your father did." So I mimicked him, and I got patted on my head. I saw my mom also following in my father's footsteps, but it was apparent she wasn't comfortable doing it. She did manage to keep the smile on her face, and in return, she was also patted on her shoulder. We weren't given even a simple hug. During the 3 weeks of our stay, I had felt isolated and ignored, and I could read the same emotions on my mother's face. The language barrier was the biggest issue for us. Nobody from my father's family spoke any English, and neither my mom nor I could speak a word of Turkish. My father had never taught me the language despite my mom's requests. She had finally purchased a book to learn a few Turkish words, but it wasn't helpful. I was lost and overwhelmed in Istanbul. It was big, crowded, ugly, loud, scary, and all those feelings hit me simultaneously. The big city emanated so much energy that an 8-year-old from a small suburb in Florida had difficulty digesting it. The neighborhood that my grandparents lived in wasn't a pretty one either. High-rise apartment buildings, one after another, on both sides of narrow streets, covered with tiny mosaic tiles that had lost their colors to dust and dirt, made the neighborhood dark and depressing. The kids around my age would play outside by the road and try to avoid the cars passing them at high speeds. There were little neighborhood stores, but they didn't seem to be doing any business, as their owners were always sitting outside playing backgammon almost all day. The only highlight of my days was encountering the owner of the small grocery store under our building. He always greeted me with "hello" whenever we passed by his little store and offered me little candies or gum after he asked my mom's permission first with his eyes. With a thick white beard and gray hair, this old man was the only friendly face I remembered from my visit. Our city tours mostly involved visits with relatives and a lot of Turkish tea and eating. I got to see a little bit of the essence of the city only when we were stuck in traffic, trying to reach either a relative or my grandparents' house. Either way, the big city didn't feel pleasant. My grandfather had immigrated to Istanbul from the east of Turkey, which was a more conservative part of the country, traditionally similar to Middle Eastern countries. He married his wife through an arranged marriage, and she was from the same area. The family kept their Middle Eastern traditions intact, very religious and conservative, which wasn't hard in Istanbul as the city offered all kinds of cultural support to its people. My father was born and grew up in Istanbul. His parents had a small rug store that was eventually passed to their older son since my father was in the US. My mother told me that my father went to college in Istanbul. It was one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Eventually, his point of view started to change and became somewhat different from what his parents had taught him. Religion started playing less of a role in his life. He was a talented, intelligent young man, and he managed to receive a full scholarship in the US to get his master's degree. Otherwise, his parents wouldn't have been able to afford the expenses abroad in a country like the US. Aside from his intelligence, he was charming, with dark brown hair and beautiful, deep brown eyes. They say the eyes are the gateway to the heart, but his heart was never as impressive as his eyes were. He was dating another girl in my mom's class. I used to tease my mom about stealing her best friend's boyfriend and that she was being condemned for her sins. She was really offended by my comment and kept explaining herself, how she wasn't even friends with the girl, but they were just two girls who happened to be taking the same class. She used to say, "They didn't break up because of me. Things between them didn't work out, and he and I started going out after they broke up." My father's family never approved of my mother. She was everything that they were against and that their son was supposed to avoid. She was Christian, and she had no interest in converting to Islam. She couldn't speak their language, she wasn't Turkish, and she knew nothing about their culture. They made it very clear during our visit to Turkey that we were not welcome there. I wasn't a grandchild to them. I was only the daughter of an American woman who happened to be staying in their house. I once told my mom, "I wish it hadn't worked out between you two." "I'm really sorry, Laura," she told me regretfully. "I loved your father more than anything then. He was different from the rest of the boys, calm and smart, and his accent was charming." Her eyes would sparkle for a split second. "If I had known how much it would hurt my child for me to be with him, do you think I would have gotten close to him?" I nodded to her response as if I approved of her point of view, but the truth of the matter was, I still wished she had never met him and that I had never been born. "On the other hand," she said, "I should be thankful that he gave me such a perfect child. I wouldn't change you for anything in the world." I had always thought it was such a lame comment to make, considering all the troubles I went through as a teenager. I was always average, if not below average, on everything, and I barely made it to college. She could have done much better with another child from another man. Istanbul had to be at least partly to blame for our pain. "You promised me. You promised I would love it." I raised my voice to Azur. "Why did you bring me here? I hate it already." He glanced at me with a remorseful expression.
Put your seatbelt on,
he said calmly. Our taxi driver was driving as if he was on a racetrack, running red lights and just about running over pedestrians. He stopped watching the road. I could see he was looking at my reaction through the front mirror. "Tell him to mind his own business," I told Azur, pointing at the driver. Azur didn't have to tell him anything. The driver returned to his racetrack-style driving once he realized he had been caught staring. You're not planning to take me to my father's, right? This would have been the worst idea of all.
No. All I want is to show you the other face of the city. You need to correct the wrong impressions in your mind. There is so much to love here. It will be a simple city tour. Trust me, please.
Thankfully, we arrived at our destination in one piece, despite the lunatic taxi driver. I was calmer when I got out of the taxi, as the driver had made me focus on the road. I became more concerned about preserving my life than about recalling my childhood experiences in the city. How do you know Turkish? I asked Azur, while he led me to the front door of an old, historic gray stone building.
Similar to how I know English. When you work on a planet for a while, you get to know a few languages. Plus, this city is one of my favorites. I've been here many times.
We waited in a short line that seemed to be a ticket counter. How many languages do you speak? I asked.
A few.
He was avoiding my question so he wouldn't intimidate me. What is this place? I changed the subject, deciding it didn't matter.
It is called Basilica Cistern, or Sunken Place, Yerbatan Sarnuj in Turkish. It was built by the Byzantines to provide filtered water to some parts of the city, and it was basically a huge water container. There are many cisterns and underground passages stretching all across and underneath this city. Some haven't even been discovered yet. This is only one of them, but the most impressive one. Strong energies reside in these underground places. They work as the Earth's protectors, and we're here to feel them.
Why are they here? How do they protect the Earth? I wasn't sure if I was ready to feel any energy. We went inside the old building. I could feel the dampness in the air when we took the stone steps that descended into the entrance of the cistern.
Istanbul is an ancient city. Many civilizations have come and gone here, and it has always been the center of attention due to its geographical location as a bridge between Europe and Asia, and its richness in every way. Eventually, unique energies built up. There are other places like Istanbul around the world that hold similar energies, but this city is one of the best.
He grinned as if he were making his point of how wrong I was with my bias against the city.
These powerful energies are spirits from higher dimensions. They have never existed in human form. They are highly advanced beings who deeply care for the Earth and its inhabitants. Their purpose is to absorb negative energy, transform it into positive, and radiate it back to Earth. They're here to help.
Probably the look on my face made him stop talking. We had reached the bottom of the stairs. Hundreds of tall, slender granite columns, each carved and engraved differently, supported the weight of the cistern and the round arches of its roof. The entire place was lit with dimmed floodlights. There were webs of platforms built above the water for visitors to stroll around the forest of columns. The view was breathtaking and mesmerizing. Beneath the platforms, there were fish as big as my forearms swimming calmly in the water. The place wasn't crowded, and people were whispering instinctively as if they didn't want to disturb unseen forces.
Take a breath.
Azur whispered in my ear. I realized I had probably been holding my breath since I entered the cistern.
Do you feel the spirits?
I looked at him with questioning eyes. I do feel something, but I can't name it. It feels so calm and serene here, almost mesmerizing, I said, but wasn't sure if it was the correct answer. A wave of subtle energy had settled down on me like a wired net, blanketing me gently and connecting me to the ground. It transferred all my negativity from my body to the earth, but I didn't know how to explain it to Azur. I couldn't think of the right words to describe my feelings at the moment. We slowly walked to the far end, at the left corner of the cistern, while I was admiring the fish in the water, swimming among the columns. I wanted to be one of them. I wanted to make this place my home, carefree and tranquil. When we reached the far end, I noticed there were 2 columns designed differently from the rest of the columns in the cistern. 2 versions of the same woman's head were used as a basis for these columns. One of the heads was placed upside down, and the other was tilted to the side. She must have been one of the Greek goddesses, as I had recognized her from her serpent hair.
These are Medusa heads.
Azur had the urge to introduce me to them since he knew my lack of knowledge and interest in the subject. Why is one upside down and the other tilted?
Medusa is known as part of Greek mythology, the evil Gorgon, whose look turned men to stone. However, Medusa actually was the serpent goddess of the Libyan Amazons. She represented the female wisdom of past, present, and future. All that has been, that is, and that will be. She was even called the mother of all gods. When the earth energy changed during one of its cycles, the energy switched from female to male, and humans couldn't bear to have a female god who would represent wisdom for all there is. Humans always have difficulty living in the present moment, which is the only truth, in reality. Therefore, they've mostly associated goddesses with the past, which was death, and the future, which was unknown and scary, so eventually, they made an evil Gorgon out of the goddess. These Medusa heads came here from a different place where she was once appreciated. The reason this one has been placed upside down is to reduce the power of her so-called gaze. But for the other one, they had to level the column, so they had to tilt it. These were submerged underwater for many years anyway, so they didn't have to pay much attention to the heads.
Poor thing, I teased, looking at the upside-down head, though I didn't really take the myth seriously. She should have changed her hairdo. I think the snakes created the wrong image for her.
Oh, I don't think she minds. She is what she is. What others think of her doesn't make her any less,
He said in a solemn tone as if there were truth to the myth. Is this a real woman? I asked, surprised.
Why else would I tell you if she wasn't real?
He paused for a second, then,
Well, at least to some extent.
he corrected himself.
The snake symbol has many meanings, and one represents the Milky Way galaxy because of its spiral shape. That is why her hair is made of snakes. She holds the energy of the Milky Way. I've told you everything is energy. You, me, the spirits here that you can't hear but you can feel. These mythical gods from all cultures, Greek, Egyptian, Indian, whatever culture you can think of. They are also highly evolved energies and fragments of our galaxy. There were times during the Earth's history when humans were able to feel them and communicate with them. Eventually, these abilities disappeared. The stories were told from mouth to mouth, changed from one culture to another, and finally, they became metaphors.
Interesting. I thought they were only make-believe stories.
There are unlimited possibilities to creation, Lara. An advanced soul can become anything it wants. Those who have chosen to evolve further can experience different forms. Aside from angelic or other bodiless forms, some choose to become planets, then suns, then black holes, and eventually, they create their own galaxy and even a universe. It is part of a cycle with unlimited possibilities, and yet it is all part of the one creator, one God, who experiences the form through this cycle of existence. We all are capable of experiencing these endless options of creation.
My head was spinning. I wasn't sure if I was wise enough to comprehend what he was telling me.
See that little hole in the column?
He pointed at a little carving on a column right next to the column of Medusa's head.
If you put your thumb there and wish something, it will come true.
I looked at him to see if he was teasing, but I couldn't figure it out from his expression. I placed my thumb in the little hole anyway. I wished I would be able to ascend to his level soon, so I could live with him forever. Will it really come true? I asked.
Why not? You're the god. If you really want to make it happen, it will. What did you wish for?
Nothing. I shrugged my shoulders. He laughed beautifully. Stay tuned for and more incredible artwork. Please remember to like our videos and subscribe to our channel.